This is quite possibly the most accommodating board game I've ever played. Think of any common pitfall that tends to come up in huge campaign games. No, scratch that. Think of any pitfalls that plague board games, period. You have an inconsistent group, boom, quick swap rules for changing people around constantly at all available player counts, newcomer or not. Everyone has wildly different skill levels. Not only is there a diverse selection of complexities among the available characters, but you can also choose to play a simplified version of each one. Run whatever combination of these as you want, because even though there has to be 4 characters, any player count within 1 to 4 players works. So if you're solo and don't want to micromanage 4 entire characters, you can tone it back as much as you'd like. And if you're not sure what permutation you want to use, because the character quick swap rules exist in the first place, not only does this work for an inconsistent group, you can also just freely swap around your setup even with your regulars to see what works for you and your group. You see your friends, they want to come over today, try it out, man. So yeah, Oathsworn, Boss Battler, Campaign, the new up and coming Horizon Star that I really wouldn't be surprised if it ends up reaching the best of the best on BGG. Let's talk about it. Oh, also, we received this game for free from Shadowborn Games, so disclaimer, sponsored video and all that jazz, so let that information recontextualize everything I say if you're rightfully skeptical about that. I've solo played 5 chapters out of the 21. Not enough for a review in my opinion, so you're getting an impressions video for now. God knows when a full review would drop in the future. Because of this, I'm gonna focus on the more surface level stuff. Like for starters, Oathsworn's design is filled to the brim with user friendliness. Immediately upon opening, you get an unboxing and organization guide. And the game comes with extremely good inserts that organizes everything so well for you. On top of that, you get 2 rulebooks, one for story, one for boss battles. And you get a QR code for the official narration app, which, by the way, also has the rules in it via links to their how to play videos. Absolutely incredible. Man, I yearn for the days when this level of care is standard, because honestly, I'm beginning to think that it's unacceptable otherwise when it comes to caked up, dumpy chunker boxes like this. Oathsworn pulls out all the stops when it comes to getting itself onto your table when played, no matter your circumstances. But it can't do that without fundamentally tying these accessibility features into the gameplay itself, like with the simplified characters and quick swap rules, which by the way tie very nicely into the component save system since there's baggies and divider cards to sort literally everything on top of the amazing insert. So here's the big question, are we now ruining the gameplay by doing this? As the saying goes, making something that's for anyone usually means liked by everyone, loved by no one. Well, it's not like Oathsworn is trying to be a whole lot of different games all at once. There's no random deck building or dungeon crawling or a PvP mode shoved in. It's always going to be a campaign-driven boss battler. It's just that it does manifest as a number of different variations of said boss battler, all of which are still true to its identity. Like the game is going to be played drastically differently for someone who's doing higher difficulty hardcore permadeath mode versus someone who's using lower difficulties and simplified characters. But it's still the same fundamental rules, just with significantly different options available during gameplay. Different formats of a trading card game, different patches of a live service game, you get the idea. So how are Oathsworn's fundamental gameplay rules? Extremely solid. The card play system guarantees that initially you have a wide swath of options that shrinks as time goes on since cards you play go on cooldown. It's not really a cooldown since the cards don't naturally come back after a certain time. You instead have to play more cards into them to push them back to your hand. But whatever, point is, you're not going to have access to all your cards all the time as the fight goes on. It shares a lot of what makes Gloomhaven Combat tick in being a hex-based ability card managing system where you're constantly torn between doing the efficient play that helps you manage the card play mechanisms better versus doing the immediately relevant action that's good for the current situation. And while their mechanics are really different, they both manifest mastery of the system in manipulating how well you can do both at the same time so that your cards are never off schedule when you need them. To make this clear, an example of a difficult situation that could come up is if you have a bunch of cards sitting there in cooldown position 1, which means it's just about to go back to your hand, but the card in your hand that is played on 1 doesn't do anything for you right now, and you have to weigh that against your other cards that go to different cooldown positions. In other words, how much do you want to sacrifice potential future options being available for the here and now better play? This, when combined with how the bosses are almost always steadily increasing their threat levels if left unchecked, and you've got yourself a consistent formula for engaging fights that demand juggling a whole lot of circumstances to be aligned properly. Whether it be positioning, boss aggro, cooldowns, your energy slash mana slash whatever you want to call it, etc. But yeah, the bosses are another aspect that are super engaging for 2 primary factors: how they're tied to the plot and how there's constant novelty since every chapter is pulling out a fresh new fight. I'm sure there's some repeat repeat bosses down the line, but a preliminary look at the backs of the encounter boards tells me that every single chapter has unique special rules. But also having 2 entire boxes dedicated to encounter minis is fucking bonkers. Like, that is so many different bosses. Of course, that's around 20 envelopes with punch out standees if you don't have the minis version. Point is, that's a ludicrous amount of variety. And for the story, my god, this might just be the strongest example of narrative meets gameplay that I've ever seen in a board game. Because every single boss is hidden until you actually unlock the fight, every chapter's story almost plays like an investigative mystery that really injects you into the world without having to exposition dump. You get to learn so much about whatever city you're in and the world at large whenever you go around exploring because of how the story gameplay loop is structured. You still have the classic choose your own adventure storybook going on, but how you're directed there is so good. Chapters have time tracks and you can walk around your area by visiting location tokens, at which point they go onto the time track to signify time passing and to direct you to which passage to read. This brilliant design does so many things. First, the sense of time progression is excellent, and because there's a literal time track, the game can easily check against how long you're taking and direct you to different passages if you visit a spot that contextually changes based on time of day. Next, location tokens are super duper multi-purpose. They mark where you're allowed to go, they have passage directories, they mark the time of day. Like, this all could have been so much more abstracted through rules or story text, but because it's communicated to the player with extremely tangible components, the representation of your story actions is incredibly strong. The feeling of looking at the map, which by the way, the multiple different maps are beautifully detailed to the point that you should be making inferences by looking at said details, and following up on a hunch to, I don't know, get info from regulars at the tavern whose map placement potentially implies they were nearby the fishy circumstances you're investigating, is done so well. It really feels like such an organic way to get involved in this world, especially when the location story text you read usually has only the perspective of people from that spot specifically, which greatly helps to sell the illusion that this world does not revolve around you as a game like Pocket Dimension which only starts and stops at your presence, but rather a living, breathing world oozing with culture that doesn't bore you with constant explanations. It's kind of like the difference between reading up on a place and how their people are versus actually visiting and talking to them. I didn't read a lore dump that getting wood in this world is super valuable and dangerous. I was investigating the extremely concerning circumstances behind why a logging company and their armed protection were absolutely obliterated and asking around about it, right? Like talking to the local banksmith, yep, not the blacksmith, and putting 2 and 2 together that your currency is just straight up iron. So seeing that someone like a blacksmith who manages a ton of iron would of course function like a bank and not just a person who creates equipment makes so much sense. And the best part is you run into so many small world building tidbits like that all the time, delivered as asides from lively locals who tangentially bring up details about the world they live in just by talking to you about your main objective to hunt down boss monsters. Not to say there isn't a main story or anything, which obviously is still the main focus. It's just that it's really nice to learn about and feel so involved in this world while chasing after your primary goal. Speaking of, the next thing the time track does is encourage you to get to the bottom of the chapter's mystery as fast as possible. Lore-wise, you obviously would rather be fighting in the daytime. Gameplay-wise, this is represented as you steadily covering up more and more of the time track the longer you take, to the point that you cover up potential extra rewards. Always a fan of when there's mechanics that incentivize you to hurry up, because for immersion reasons, your guys probably wouldn't be hanging out around town trying to get to know everyone better. Not that there's anything stopping you from doing it anyways if you want. Hell, you could probably even make back the difference in rewards just by talking to the right people and getting cool stuff from them, which is also the natural consequence of not having time constraints, because why wouldn't you go do all the side stuff to get stronger? This also is a not half bad way of getting more replayability in there, because not only are there alternate story paths, but if you were trying to quickly get the main goal done in the first playthrough, then that definitely means you missed out on a ton of moment-to-moment locations to visit. Oh, and I need to emphasize this, it never feels like you're being rushed along. It's giving more like you're urgently trying to stop the monster from escaping or killing more people, which by the way is something that Oathsworn does that obliterates so many other campaign games in making every fight feel so integral to the plot. Every battle is the culmination of investigating some sort of lead or the consequences of momentous story events that drive you into desperate combat situations. There's all this anticipation and build-up every time that always gets to be realized once you're in the thick of it. Never have I ever cared so much about every individual fight because of how immediately relevant to the plot they've all been. Like, Oathsworn may very well be the final nail in the coffin for me when it comes to tolerating random, unnecessary fights in story-heavy board games now that I've experienced this game's structure. And even if you're someone who doesn't care much for the story and just wants to dive into awesome combat, Oathsworn even has you covered there with the instant action mode that lets you just boss rush the game by abridging the chapters down to short summaries that quickly give you all the gameplay effects from the storybook before jumping right into the boss battle. Also, this is a genius way to hide chapter and counter information because the boss battle setup is always on the reverse page. The designers accounted for the fact that every new boss is a spoiler, so the layout can't just be back-to-back encounter setups. But then what do you do with the extra pages if the layout hides them, like placing them in every other page? Well, duh, another accommodation for another player type. All of that is the core of Oathsworn's story plus gameplay loop. And all of the component plus gameplay accessibility gets you there super smoothly without compromising said gameplay. Hence why I'm saying this game's design as a whole is unbelievably thoughtful for being so considerate of basically everything you could ever ask for. Like, you can even freely choose between using dice or cards when it comes to the game's randomness, which I find so over the top that this is even a thing. Fuck, even your purchasing options are super choice friendly because, like, if you just want the game and none of the cosmetic fluff, there's the standee version. And if you want all the minis, there's separate mystery boxes. And then of course, there's further deluxe components if you're into that. But this is where I gotta dial it back and bring us down to earth, because remember, I'm not that far in this game, so there's a possibility that some of these points are subject to change. I don't know how the replayability is ultimately gonna be, though the quick leveling rules apparently also let you just hop into whatever chapter as a one-shot if you want to just treat this game like any other non-campaign co-op game to bring out with friends at game night. Speaking of, I haven't tried playing this with other people yet, and I remember reading online somewhere a comment that said you can end up with drastically different levels of downtime if someone is playing a simplified character versus another person doing a max complexity one. But then when it comes to balancing, I'm not the most confident on it yet, though I will point out that I haven't had one of my guys hit 0 health a single time, so I should probably be playing on harder difficulties instead of normal. If anything, that's good on the game for being flexible with the difficulty so you can play with your preferred intensity. And not to mention the classic expectation to run into some rules and typo jank that seems to just be the norm for big campaign games. I've run into a few random typos, thankfully nothing that mattered, but then there were some sparse ruling or text error shenanigans going on. Like the appendix describing the consume special effect doesn't say you need to be adjacent, which was kind of weird when it came up from a boss and it'd be like long distance eating you, but that was cleared up from a quick BGG search that yes, it's intended to be adjacent only. And also, this is the second printing version, which does have some small rules changes like how fire works and a different amount of common item rewards per chapter, which weren't updated in their rules videos. Not gonna lie, kind of cringe that this is the revised version and I'm still running into stuff like chapter 5's intro, where when talking to a captain, you can choose to threaten him or talk him down, yet the results are mixed up so you can get this captain nodding along like, yes, I've considered your words, when it's definitely supposed to be this response to roll up your sleeves and show a sick tat on your wrist. Thankfully though, this hasn't happened that much, nor has it led to huge pauses that break the flow of the game, and it's been really easy looking up clarification online. Plus, it's pretty sick how, since there's the rulebooks and the official videos, if something isn't clear in one spot, it can probably be clarified in the other. Like there's this rule where if you break a body part on the boss, it does a reaction in response that interrupts you, but the rulebook doesn't mention the exact timing of this, because like, does that interruption keep your card on hold until the reaction is over and then you discard it to start pushing cooldowns around? That matters because if you're attacked from that reaction, you might play a defense card and you want to sequence your cooldowns properly. But then no, check the video and on reactions they finish doing all the card play stuff and then do the reaction. Nice. But whatever, I'm sure I'll run into and think of way more pros / cons if I ever sit down and do a proper analysis in the future, plus iron out thoughts that aren't fully there yet. Because like as an example, some of the minis have issues with crazily protruding parts that block them from being in certain hexes with each other, which wouldn't normally be an issue except for how in this game facing direction matters. At the same time, there's a cosmetic add-on that lets you replace your character's weapons to match whatever items you have equipped, which as dumb as it sounds, it might be an actual solution to this, but at the same time, it isn't normally part of the game. And to top it all off, you could just use standees and tiles to bypass this altogether, so I don't know, that one's a thinker. Point is, I just wanted to get some quick, unstructured rambling out there for now. If you're wondering in clear-cut bluntness what the vibe check is, my personal enjoyment levels so far for this entire experience have been excellent. If I had to give a recommender score based on absolutely nothing, do not listen to this, it's bullshit conjecture that doesn't critically weigh pros and cons, I'd guess like somewhere in the 7 to 9 range, I think. Fuck it. Video's over. Thanks for watching. Like the video if you want to help us out. And if you want to go even further, we got a Patreon if you want to check out exclusive content like behind the scenes stuff, as well as YouTube memberships if you want to be able to post comments here with Shelfside emojis. See ya.